Okay, today we are going to be learning the sixth parak of Mesechet Bרכות. Before we jump into the Mishnayos themselves, let us first review a couple of things about Mishnayos in general. Okay, so a Mishnah has basically four parts. The first part is that of a case, which we call a mikra. The point of a Mishnah is to teach us about a specific case that we will highlight in green boxes. The second part is the din, is the rule about that specific case. That will be in red. That, and in general, we'll find that there are sometimes a machlokas. There is sometimes an argument about what the rule is in that case. Third part of a Mishnah is an omer. Someone says something. So generally, you'll have a specific rabbi state what the rule is in a specific case. Sometimes there's a specific rabbi stated, and we'll indicate that by blue. Other times, it's just an anonymous Tana, anonymous rabbi, and we call that rabbi either the Rabbanan, the rabbis in general, the Chachamim, the sages, or the Tanakama. It's all the same thing. The last part of a Mishnah is sometimes it will give a ta'am, a reason for the specific din. That we will highlight in yellow. Actually, for this video, we will show a fifth type of statement that can be found in the Mishnah. It's not as common, but it's called a koteris. It's called a title. We're going to indicate that with a black box minus the smiley face. And what a title is that basically the Mishnah gives us an introduction as to what we are going to be talking about in the Mishnah. And with that, let us start the Mishnah. So Mishnah Aleph in Perek Vav starts the following: Keitza mevarchin al haperos. Now, that is a title, that is koteret. Keitzad mevarchin al haperos. How do we make brachos on peros, which are fruits? Now, as we're going to see, peros here does not mean fruits as we know fruits that you buy in the store, like apples, oranges, that sort of thing. Peros here means anything, fruits that come from the ground, or some way that are grown. So it's a general statement for foods that are grown. So we're going to call that peros, foods that are grown. So that is what the Mishnah is going to talk about. It's going to talk about the different bracha you say before eating a fruit that is grown. So our first case is peros al peros ha'ilan, on fruits from the tree, right? That's what we call fruits. Omer borei pri ha'etz. So the din in that case is if you want to eat a fruit from the tree, what bracha are you supposed to make before you eat it? So the Mishnah tells us, you say borei pri ha'etz, which means the one who created the fruit of the tree. Eitz is a tree, so that makes sense. So now we have another case. So we're told chutz min hayayin. Chutz means except. There's an exception to peros ha'ilan, to fruit from a tree, and that is of wine. Wine is made out of grapes, which comes from a tree. So, according to what we just said, you say borei pri ha'etz. However, the Mishnah tells us that the rule in that case is that you say she'al hayayin omer borei pri hagafen. That on wine you say the bracha of borei, the one who creates pri hagafen, the fruit of the gafen, the vine. Now, the Gemara is going to discuss why certain fruits get special brachos. For now, we're just going to say it gets a special bracha, a special blessing. Next case, ve'ala peros haaretz. So on the fruit of the ground, right? On fruit of the ground. So for example, potatoes that grow from the ground. What do you say on those foods? So the Mishnah tells us, you say Omer borei pri ha'adama. You say the one who created the fruit of the ground, which makes sense because it grows from the ground. And again, we have another section, chutz min pas, except for pas, which is bread. If you want to remember what pas is, pat is similar to pita. A pita bread is a pat. So chutz min hapas, except for bread, which, as we know, bread is made out of flour, which grows from the ground. So we don't say borei pri adama on bread, but rather the Mishnah tells us she'alapat hu omer hamotzi lechem min haaretz. But rather on bread you say hamotzi lechem min haaretz, the one who brings forth bread from the ground. Again, bread has a special bracha. Va'al hayarakos, and on vegetables. So, for example, cucumbers, celery, those types of things that grow from the ground. So the Mishnah says the rule in that case is Omer Borei Pri Adama, that you say, as we said before, Borei Pri Ha'adama, the one who creates fruit from the ground. Now, here we actually have a machlokes, because that was the opinion of the Rabbanan, the unnamed opinion in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda argues and says that no, yirakos, vegetables, have a special bracha as opposed to other things that grow from the ground. For example, as we said before, potatoes. So, borei minei dishaim, that you say, blessed is the one who created species of dishaim. Dishaim is, well, in Hebrew, desha is grass, but I guess a better definition of that would be herbs. So things that basically vegetables. So the Yirakos get their own bracha according to Rabbi Yehuda. Now, it should be noted that for all of these brachos, it just gives us the conclusion of the bracha. It's assuming you know how all brachos start, which is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. That is how all these brachos start, and then the conclusion is depending on what food it is: Borei Pri Ha'etz, or Borei Pri Hagafen, or Borei Pri Adama, etc. Okay, just to review this past Mishnah, we can sum it up in the following. Sorry about that. We can sum it up in the following way. The Mishnah is discussing brachos that you make before eating peros, fruits which means food that is grown from somewhere originating in the ground. So we have different types of peros. First, we have peros ha'ilan, trees from fruit from a tree. The bracha on fruit from a tree is borei pri ha'etz, which makes sense, fruits that grows from the tree. The exception to this rule is wine, which comes from grapes, which has a special bracha, borei pri hagafen. The next type of fruits are peros ha'aretz, fruits that grow from the ground directly, not from a tree. So, naturally, the bracha is borei pri adama, the one who created fruits of the ground. The exception to this rule is pas, is bread. Again, flour comes from wheat, and that's how you make bread. And it gets a special bracha, motzi lechem min haaretz. Third category is a special group of peros ha'aretz called yirakos, vegetables. That includes cucumbers and the such. So versus peros ha'aretz, which can include potatoes and other things like that. So there's machlokas about what the bracha on yirakos are, on vegetables are. The Rabbanan, the unnamed opinion in the Mishnah, say that you say borei pri adama. Rabbi Yehuda argues and says no, they get a special bracha borei minei dishaim, that you, the one who created species of herbs or vegetables. Okay, the next Mishnah, Mishnah Beis, is going to discuss a scenario of, let's say you made the wrong bracha. Does it still count? Now, for purposes of this, for this Mishnah, when it's going to say yatsa, that means the bracha counted and you don't need to make a new bracha. But when you say lo yatsa, it does not, you did not fulfill your obligation, did not count, which therefore means that you do need to make a new bracha. Okay? So with that, let us go on to the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, Beirach al haperos ha'ilan, so, borei pri ha'adama. So let's say you made beirach, you blessed, al peros ha'ilan, on the fruits of a tree. So for example, an apple, borei pri adama, you made the blessing, Borei Pri Ha'adama, the one who creates fruits from the ground. So you made the wrong bracha, because on an apple, you need to say Borei Pri Ha'etz. It grows from a tree, not from the ground. So the rule the Mishnah states is that Yatza, which as we see below, over here, it means that you do not need to make a new bracha. You fulfilled your obligation. Why? The Mishnah doesn't tell us, but we can logically come to the conclusion. Fruits grow from a tree. A tree grows from, that's right, the ground. And the ground, so when you say Borei Pri Ha'adama, the fruits from the ground, you are accurately describing an apple. An apple does grow from the ground technically. It grows from a tree which grows from the ground. Therefore, even though it's not the proper bracha, it still counts because it accurately describes the fruit that you're eating. However, with that in mind, the opposite is not true. So v'al peros haaretz borei pre'etz, but if you have peros haaretz, a fruit of the ground. So for example, a potato. If you are eating a potato and you say borei pri ha'etz, the one who creates fruits of the tree, so in that case, did you fulfill your obligation of making a bracha, or do you have to make a new bracha? So the Mishnah tells us, lo yatza, you do not fulfill your obligation, and therefore you need to say a new bracha. Why? Because to say that a potato grows from a tree is inaccurate. Potatoes do not grow from a tree; they grow from the ground. Therefore, you have to make a new bracha. Third case, al kulam im amar sha'akol niyeh. Continuation bidvaro. The Mishnah leaves out that last word. But if on anything, kulam, on all of them, meaning on any foods, im amar shehakol niyeh bidvaro, if you said the bracha which concludes shehakol, that all nihiyah exists bidvaro, through his words, by means of his word, his being God, that God creates everything basically, so then, yatza, you fulfill your obligation. You do not need to make a new bracha. So whether you had an apple, whether you had a potato, whether you had any other food, and you said shehakol, either because you made a mistake or because you just didn't know the bracha, so then yatza, you fulfill your obligation. You do not need to make a new bracha to continue eating it, because that accurately describes all foods. All foods God created. Everything exists because of God. And therefore, you do not need to make a new bracha. So, to sum up, the Mishnah is discussing wrong bracha. What if you made the wrong bracha before eating a food? Do you have to make a new one? So the first case was, let's say you take an apple, and you say borei pri ha'adama, an apple grows from a tree. So the Mishnah tells us, yatza, you fulfilled your obligation. You do not need to make a new bracha, because it is true, an apple does grow from the ground, indirectly from a tree. Second case is the opposite. Let's say you took a potato and you said borei pri ha'etz and then munched into that potato. The Mishnah tells you that does not count, lo yatza, because it is not accurate to say that a potato grows from a tree. The Mishnah's final case is that basically any food, if you said shehakol nihiyeh bidvaro, that everything exists based on Hashem's word, which is what that bracha means, so then yatza, that you do fulfill your obligation. You do not need to make a new bracha, and that's kind of like the default bracha that can work for anything. Mishnah Gimel. This Mishnah is going to describe foods, what bracha you make on them, that are not peros. That, as we said, again, peros are foods that are grown. So we're going to discuss in this Mishnah, what bracha do you make on foods that are not grown? So al davar she'ein gidilo mina aretz. So the first case is that, let's say, as we said before, al davar, on something, she'ein gidulo mina aretz, that its growing is not from the ground, meaning it's not a fruit, it's not grown. So omer shehakol niyeh bidvaro. So you make the bracha, the default bracha, as we saw before, of shehakol. So that includes meat and milk and all those types of things. Next case, ala chometz v'ala novlos v'ala govai. On these types of foods, so these are going to be specific foods. So chometz is vinegar, novlos are are fruits that are not completely ripe yet, and they fall off the tree before they finish becoming ripe. And govai is a type of grasshopper. So in fact, we actually have 3 different cases in this case. So chometz, vinegar, fruits that are not completely ripe, and govai are a small type of grasshopper. Yes, grasshoppers or certain types of grasshoppers are kosher. So omer shahakol. So the Mishnah tells us again that you say shahakol. That's the rule in this case. Now you might think we already said that because these things don't grow from the ground, but you'll see why it's relevant to single these out in a second. Next case, ala chalav v'ala gvina v'al habeitzim. So on milk, cheese, and eggs. Chalav is milk, gvina is cheese, and beitzim are eggs. Omer shahakol. You say the bracha of shahakol. Now, again, these cases, why would you think these are different? So we'll answer that at the end. Last point, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol shehu min klala, ein mevarchin alav, you do not make a bracha on it. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol shehu min klala, case, anything that is a species of klala, of curse. So the rule is ein mevarchin alav. You do not make a bracha on these things. Now, what is a species of curse? So he's referring to the 3 cases we had earlier. Vinegar. It's a cursed food, so to speak, because it's wine that has gone bad. Okay? The way vinegar is made is that wine basically spoils. So obviously wine is better than vinegar. So wine is considered the good thing. Chometz is considered the cursed food because it's in a bad state. So Rabbi Yehuda says it's not proper to make a bracha on that because that's not its ideal state. Novlos, the second case, is fruits that have not become completely ripe. They're not good fruits, so they're cursed in a sense. And the third thing, govai, are grasshoppers. Grasshoppers are considered to be a cursed food because they eat all the crops of that the farmers plant, and the worst thing that a farmer wants is a plague of locusts to come and eat his crops, because they'll eat everything. So Yehuda says, since these things are destructive or cursed in a sense, so you don't make a bracha on these foods. So that explained 2 things. Number 1, if we go back to what we said before, why does the Mishnah single out vinegar, the chometz, the novlos, and the govai, the vinegar, the unripe fruits, and the grasshoppers? Because, as we just saw, there's an opinion that argues and says they don't get a bracha at all. That's why the Mishnah needs to single out those specific foods and say that there's one opinion that they do get a bracha, that they say that they do, in fact, you say shahakol on them because you're still benefiting from them. The third case where we said al hechalav vi al hagvina vi al habeitzim, so on those cases, the reason why you might think that they don't follow the general rule is because those things kind of grow from the ground. They grow from animals, right, which are connected to the ground. So you might think that they might be different and get a special bracha. Mishnah tells you that that's not so. So, to review, the Mishnah talks about 2 types of cases. First of all, it says foods that are not peros. So the bracha for those are shahakol niyeh b'dvaro. Anything that doesn't grow from the ground, you say shahakol. And then it says, but if there are foods that are cursed, there are bad foods. So that's inclusive in that are vinegar, which is bad wine, unripe fruits, and grasshoppers. So there's a machlokes, the Rabbanan, the rabbis, the unnamed opinion in the Mishnah say that you say shahakol, just like every other non-peros food. And Rabbi Yehuda says, no, since they're a min klala, they are a cursed type of food or species, they don't get any bracha.